Thank you. Aloha, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I am helping with the Gems of the Wisdom tradition for Renee. And today's program is going to be on recognizing greatness from the wisdom traditions. And we have many definitions of greatness today that are consistent with our cultural emphasis on materiality and competition. The ancients had a different focus. This discussion will compare these ideas and open the group discussion to how we may move backwards to recognizing aspects of greatness from the ancient wisdom. And our speaker today is Roger Epstein, who has been an attorney in Hawaii for 50 years and has been a director of some of Hawaii's largest local companies. Roger has an eclectic interfaith religious practice, which includes Judaism, Christianity, Taoism, Buddhism, and Sufism. In 1990, Roger was asked by Joseph Campbell's widow to form the Joseph Campbell Foundation and served on its board until 2021. But from 2000 until 2018, he hosted monthly meetings of the Hawaii Forgiveness Project, which was founded by Jerry Jamplowski. Roger continues to provide legal help to many religious and charitable organizations in Hawaii and is the president of the Maitreya Institute, which provides and supports programs in art, healing, and spirituality from all traditions. Thank you, Roger. I am going to turn the program over to you.
Thank you very much, Mary. As Mary said, what we've been doing is meeting Saturdays to look at some, quote, gems of wisdom and see how we can use those to better our current life. And we've set this program up as a discussion group so that I'll talk a little bit and then we'll see how we get the discussion going. And from my standpoint, I think everybody's, the goal is to see if there's some gems we can gather ourselves to improve our own lives, improve the lives of the community, and just kind of further the evolution of humanity, so to speak. So the topic today is recognizing greatness. And of course, if you want to recognize greatness, you have to define it. So I have a dictionary for a few definitions. Merriam-Webster says greatness is a state of superiority. Greatness can also be referred to as individuals who possess a natural ability to be better than others. The Oxford Dictionary has a slightly lesser kind of less grandiose definition that says greatness means considerably above the average. So we could take this topic on a pretty broad basis, but I'd like to look at it on kind of greatness in the larger sense, the greatest. I think of Muhammad Ali. I am the greatest. And in many ways he was. I saw him walking down the street in Washington, D.C. about 1,000 years ago, and people would come out of their stores and shake the champ's hand. And there was definitely an otherworldly, a grandiose kind of energy with him. There's always battles of who's the greatest, Michael Jordan or today LeBron James. Certainly these people have become great by working tirelessly in their fields and really developing superior powers. So we could look at greatness in that context. How about Donald Trump? He became president of the United States. There's 330 million people, so he's one of 330 million. How about Mike Pence? He had a similar philosophy, became vice president, but you hear today he saved democracy. So perhaps that was a one-off kind of greatness. I'm also looking at things like people like Jack Welch, who was the CEO of General Electric for many years, considered a great CEO during his time in the 80s and 90s, when he really, not only did he make General Electric extremely profitable, his focus was on short-term profits. And because of that, the value of the stock in the company went up dramatically. And a lot of people made a lot of money. But later on, he was significantly criticized for focusing on short-term profits rather than long-term. And General Electric, I don't know if it's completely dissolved, but I think it filed bankruptcy some years ago. So that kind of highlights what I wanted to look at from the current situation. Are we looking at short-term profits as the measure? Welch made a lot of money, but he moved us into finance being our biggest activity rather than manufacturing. It was making money for the sake of making money. Another turning point in my mind in moving us towards this focus of stardom as greatness, perhaps, was a saying by Vince Lombardi years ago in the 60s when he was coaching the Green Bay Packers and they were the best team in the world. And he said, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. Or it isn't the only thing, it's everything. I'm not sure how those two words are different, but the point was he changed the model. And you never hear this again today. You never hear, it's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. We just don't say that. Our society, at least in my view, is looking towards who's number one. And in football, for example, you have the Super Bowl, and it means to get to the Super Bowl, there's two teams left. Each one has had the best, an outstanding record for the year. They beat four of the best teams just before getting to the Super Bowl. And when they lose, immediately the announcers start to call the team that lost the loser. You came in second. You couldn't win the big one. So my theme here is a lot of what we're focused on today in terms of greatness is heavy competition, exclusion of others, winning at all costs, and admiring people who are billionaires and stars. And this is kind of the culture that I think we're in. You could make a pretty good case for that. So let's see what the ancient wisdom says. Not quite so ancient, but Renee, who wasn't here today, quoted John Ruskin, a 19th century philosopher, who said, the first test of a great man is humility. That is perhaps a sense of servant leadership, a recognition that we're all connected to each other. And it's not about me being the top. It's about all of us doing together, working together, about me being someone who is only on at the head because I can help bring us all together. And when we're successful, we should all have a substantial measure of credit rather than me getting all the money as the CEO and everyone else struggling. And I've looked at this quite a bit in the context of some discussions in business as a business lawyer for years, and some other talks about Milton Friedman's idea that in a corporation, the only thing you can be working for is profit. And if you're not looking for profits for the shareholder as a director, you've breached your duty. And if you go back to, well, when I got out of school in the 60s and 70s, the average CEO was making 40 times what the guy on the factory floor was making. Today, it's 400 or 500 times. So it doesn't matter what the absolute numbers are, but relatively, it's been a tenfold increase in the skew, and that's why we have the 1 and the 99. This is who we admire. You might call greatness, because they've made all the money. They've beat their way to the top, and because of that, they get all the spoils, and the guys on the bottom are suffering. So I put this in that same category of how we're focusing on things. So Ruskin looked at humility as an important element of greatness. If you go back to some of the people, certainly Donald Trump, you'd be hard pressed to find humility there. Maybe not Muhammad Ali, although he was an amazing character. Leonard Cohen is a songwriter and philosopher, author. He talks about saints. He says a saint is someone who has achieved a remote human possibility. And he says, I think it has to do with love. So there's another thought that not just servant leadership, but love. And I think that's another focus. If we go back into the real ancient wisdom, the Bible says greatness was given to the one who was a servant. So it's a real recognition in our one of our oldest religious texts, this concept of servant leadership, and you get greatness, and I think the rewards that go with greatness, if you want to be a leader, and perhaps you should get more of the richness, the riches. Of course, Jesus said the worst sin is pride. And why I've always thought that he says that because pride falsely separates us from each other. If we really start from the concept of we're all connected to each other, we're all connected to the universal energy of God, whatever you want to call it. If you go from there and you say pride is the worst sin, well, it's because it takes us away. It stops the recognition that we're connected to each other. So when you put the Old Testament statement about being a servant and Jesus with this concept of pride, and of course, Jesus' focus on the poor and helping them, you see that there is an element that seems to be lacking in our current measure of greatness. In the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, motivation is one of the keys to right living, to the eightfold path: right living, right livelihood, right action. If you're doing it just for your personal goal, it doesn't matter what you do. It's not great in that sense. So let's take a look. What I'm seeing from that, I kind of put together this idea from Joseph Campbell. I talked about Campbell last time I was asked to speak because I had the privilege of setting up his foundation and being involved with the group for about 30 years. And Campbell's hero's journey that we talked about the last time was every person has a hero's journey or gets the opportunity, and maybe many times in a lifetime. And what that is that you get a call to do something that's outside of your normal life. And then you don't want it, you don't think you're good enough, but eventually you take it on, and then you go through a porthole, which is so frightening, you didn't think you could do it. But when you get there, you get magical helpers, you eventually succeed in getting something valuable that you came for, that was needed, and then you bring it back to the community. So that circle is very, very clear, involving helping the community. That greatness is to help the community, and that's an element of it. So another thing Campbell says is what I want to turn to a little bit. Okay, so what are the features of greatness? You know, you want to recognize greatness. Well, what are the features? So I take Campbell talked about living on an authentic life. He has a great saying, follow your bliss, which has a lot of meanings, but clearly coming from your heart and doing what feels really good to you is an aspect of it. So here are some items listed to have an authentic life in Campbell's sayings. First of all, do something you love, and then love your surroundings. Find humor and laughter in what you do. Move and exercise your body. Cultivate relationships by surrounding yourself with loved ones. And do it now. Be yourself authentically and be of service to others. There's a similar qualities that I looked at from some gurus in the business community that talk about what's the quality of greatness. Leadership with a positive attitude, service, and you add something that can't be bought. And then they list results, efficiency, quality, reliability. So in putting these all together and thinking about how to recognize greatness, it seems to me we have turned from an ancient concept of the servant leader, the concept of if you want to be great, you have to have ethics and morals, to our love, revering advertisements that are basically lies. You know, at the Super Bowl, they have a competition to see what's the best advertisement to trick you into buying something you don't want. Will Smith, I don't know, can I use his name anymore? Anyway, Will Smith says, we have a society that buys things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. So I'd like to throw open the discussion to the thought of, first of all, anyone thinking about, is that right? Is greatness really, is the element of humility, the element of servant leadership, the element of altruism, is that critical to greatness? And if so, have we gotten away from it in a, not just in the larger cultural sense that I'm talking about, but individually in your own thinking, in your lives and what you're seeing? And lastly, you know, what can we do about it? Is it too late to change? Is it possible? And if so, where would we go and how would we do that? So Mary, it's up to you to stir the forces here and get somebody to start talking.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you, Roger. Thank you, Carolyn.
All those qualities, I mean, it's all very inspiring to listen to you, Roger. So I thank you for that. We can get too focused on our shortcomings or whatever. But I would like to put into your list or in our contemplation something about a larger vision. I mean, even though our duties may be very much with our family, our community, with our lodge or church, we really need to think globally, just maybe for 5 minutes during the day, about the rest of humanity, all of humanity, and realize that they all have human potential, but millions of them are suffering unnecessarily because of the greed or selfishness of others. So I just think that we should always find ways, if we're going to be great, at least in our perspective, we should always find ways to think about the whole human community and think about maybe something specific that we've heard about, what's happening in a particular country or group. So I would just want to put that kind of a global recognition of our fellow human beings every once in a while.
Yeah, thanks, Carolyn. You know, I would, there's that saying, think globally and act locally. And I would put this out as Hawaii is uniquely situated to think locally and act locally and perhaps have an impact globally. I really believe, and of course, many people have said the energy here and the concept of aloha, that if we could take our small, relatively small community and change the culture, so it was really not people working 2 and 3 jobs and the kind of thing that we have, even if we don't have as much abject poverty as other places, that's something we could do here. And I have thought of a number of things that we could do to change the whole culture, whether or not we have the political will, whether or not we have the capability of really doing that when money is so powerful. But I agree completely with what you're saying about, and it's kind of part of the question I asked. How do you make it a global change? How in this world with so much media, everybody can say anything they want, and what gets attention every time? You know, who's the leader that anyone or everyone's going to listen to? And so that has led me to think, if we could do something in Hawaii, we might be able to create a model that could be demonstrably used in other places.
I was thinking, Roger, when you said Hawaii's culture, I'm going, now which culture are we talking about? The Hawaiian culture, the local culture, our economic culture, which is what's really defining our people right now. Yeah, and what came to mind is everybody wants a piece of Hawaii. That's from beginning, from when Cook came, they all saw Hawaii as something to be obtained and how they could profit from it. So that's an interesting thing. I'm glad we have an opportunity to voice different views. Johnny.
I want to thank you all for being here, and thank you, Roger, for being of service. You know, being kind enough to share this talk with us and spark some ideas, spark some motivation. You had mentioned Buddhism, and I'm just getting into that. I listen to, well, lately, almost every night I go to bed, I fall asleep listening to Alan Watts lectures. And, he talks about this thing about common in Zen Buddhism, that he tries to look at the world as if the world peoples, like an apple tree apples, the world peoples, right? And even with everything that's going on, stuff that makes me want to leave, just give up on the United States. But I have parents to take care of, so it's going to have to wait until that's done. But looking at the world as if it's not, it's just doing exactly what the apple tree does, what the birds do, what anything, any creature does. It simply, it's as if nothing is out of place, even with everything that's going on. And I understand it might be hard to look at it like that. It's difficult for me to look at it like that. It's a challenge. And then I come on something like this and hear, good stuff, motivating, as I mentioned. But I'm wondering, how am I to balance the two things where I try to keep the focus on myself and to relax, I stay away from things like hold on or hang on, because that implies tension to me. I feel like I'm in the care of something greater than myself. And yet I need to process with things like the overturning of Roe versus Wade, or all of the things, the less than illustrious history of the United States, So, yeah, I'm wondering if anybody has some insight on that. In general, I feel that it's a person. It starts with self, right? Everything starts and ends with self. So I'm trying my best to live responsibly. But I'm glad I came. I'm really glad I came, and that my wheels are turning. Thank you again, Roger. Thank you all.
Let me, I see a hand up, but let me just respond to that, Johnny, before we move on. I think there's a couple of things you can look at, and I started studying Buddhism 45 years ago. And I think there's great value in it. It was brought to this country by a lot of people back in the 60s. And now we've had it for 40 or 50 years. And now Asia's coming on. I think we're going to see a blending of more Eastern, Western culture that's going to be helpful. But in response to your question, I think of a couple of things. First of all, the world works in cycles. Your life is not happy all the time. Your life, everything has its ups and downs. And in the Asian tradition, of course, that's yin and yang. So we have there's no day without the night. Doesn't exist without it. There's no world without negative things happening. We're all going to die. We're all going to get sick and die. That's a fundamental tenet of Buddhism, that life is suffering, but how do you deal with that suffering? How do you make it workable? So one thing I say is see the cycle, see the patterns. I was born the day World War II ended in Germany. And then I saw the 60s. I was a little ahead of the cusp, but just enormous changes. And then the backlash has been about 50 years from that, from the liberalism we've had now. When you look at the negatives of certain things, we've had bigger protests about things going on now than we have since the 60s. So people are coming out to that. So we don't know what the next change is going to be, but we do know that things change. And it's not always going to be the same today. And even though we're getting some news that we might not be happy with, it's a cycle. It's going to go. And the second thing is something that Joseph Campbell talks a lot about. One of his greatest quotes is, "In your darkest cave lies your greatest treasure." So what he's saying is, we can really learn and grow enormously from the bad things that happen to us. When you really suffer, you have empathy, and perhaps you get rid of some of your ego and begin to say, well, how can I make this change? And I think we could make a pretty good case that all the people unhappy with Roe v. Wade and this idea that someone said, you have a constitutional right to be born, but once you're born, the guns can kill you, you know? So I'm not sure how that works exactly, but again, and I think this is what Alan Watts is saying to you, Johnny, keep going where you are because something else is happening. Winston Churchill said, when you're in hell, keep going. And secondly, don't look at, and this is very Buddhist, don't look at what's going on now as bad. Just look at it as it's happening. And then we'll see what the next step is. You take your step, as was said earlier, take your step locally and think about how we can change the whole world. A lot of people thinking about that now. And I think that's very healthy.
Thank you. Carol Ann?
I don't know if this is just a personal evolution thing, but initially when talking about greatness and thinking, Roger, that you were looking more globally and at this aspirational or sometimes inspirational feeling that people get when they see somebody that they admire or they want to be like. And as a 30-something-year-old woman who is appalled at a lot of the things that go on in our country, I think that in recent times, I can look to my evolution of what I thought was greatness in the last 2.5 years. I watched Peyton Manning play the very last Super Bowl game that he ever played here in San Jose, California. And I would have thought probably 5 years ago when I saw that was a measure of greatness, that was a person that had hit their pinnacle, went out on top, won the last game, until I became a survivor of domestic violence. When I met Renee, I was in my second year of living confidentially in a domestic violence prevention program. Within a year of meeting her, I came to Hawaii. I needed some personal growth and inspiration into my life as to how to proceed forward after knowing that I was married to a man that murdered a woman when he was 17 years old by shooting her in the head. It took me 7 government assistance programs, 2.5 years to get a place to live on my own independently where I felt safe. In January, I met Renee on the island when I came and gave my GEMS talk about my tradition of Western medicine as a nurse in the relation of are we our bodies. In that year of time of coming in and off the island, well, the last 1.5 years, there has been such a profound growth in my own spiritual guidance and how I feel about myself, in that I look to this group and tribe of people that I have met along this journey, including you, Roger, and Carolyn, and everybody else that is probably in attendance, and to our new people, welcome. That there is something to be said about the way we measure ourselves against who we were yesterday. And that if we are our best version of ourselves today, and that if that's what we strive to be, that's really where the power of change comes. And that I see it in our younger evolution of children, the children that I interact with that are in kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade, are coming up with just profound ideas of how to unify themselves as little advocates and little miracle makers. And I watched a 2-year-old the other day reach his hand out to another little girl and say, "Can I help you up the stairs?" Never had ever been prompted to do that, but there's just something to be said that we're cultivating it, and that there is hope for humanity. As a mom, as a survivor, I filed yesterday for full custody of my children. I have a restraining order now. That man will never see me again. And that just all happened on the cusp of coming to see Renee and Cliff and getting some guidance about forgiveness, and that I don't wish this man, the death penalty, because that is a part of California law. I just wish him a life in prison to think about the things that he did. And I shouldn't feel ashamed about being in that category of not doing the eye for an eye, because as Renee said, that does make the world blind. So that is my little hope, that we can have inspiration for each other, because you guys have provided that to me.
Well, that's really beautiful. And Carol Ann, and I also think it really completes in a way what I was saying about your darkest cave having your greatest treasure. You just expressed to us that this terrible thing that really is hard to imagine, going through. We've all been through some of it, but this is your personal darkest cave, and it's caused you to leap to another plateau, if you will, in your growth, in your spiritual growth, in your life. And one of the things in Campbell's hero's journey is that once you go through that, that really difficult threshold, helpers come into your life, magical helpers like Renee, who give you guidance on how to go through the path, and that walls open where doors open where there used to be walls. So you're really living what we're talking about, and it's inspirational, of course, to hear that the kids that you're seeing are. I mean, that's another thing. Who knows? We're all worried that kids can't buy houses and cars and stuff. I don't know. Maybe it'll cause them to help somebody up the stairs. And so there's only so much we can do, but I think it's not about what happened. It's our response to it. It's the recognition that whatever happens, and maybe this is part of being a hero. This is the hero's journey. Take what comes. It's offered to you. Deal with it, and let's make the world a better place that way.
Thank you, Roger and Carol Ann, and my heart goes out to you. What a trial you've had, and thank you. And really, the Lord sends you here so that you can be surrounded by people who are capable of loving, no matter what the circumstances. And God bless you. And I just feel that everybody who has been able to hear your story, whatever portion of it you are so graciously willing to share, just, you've touched our hearts. Elizabeth?
Aloha. Yes, Carol Ann, you did touch our hearts. And that's exactly where we should be right now. And I think that's where Roger wanted to take us. I keep thinking back, Roger, to the first definitions you read in 2 dictionaries about greatness, which just made me roll my eyes, right? And I guess you too, because you didn't go any further with them. And I was, it was so obvious that the definitions of greatness that make it the biggest, the bestest, the mostest kind of thing is obsolete now. It's a product of patriarchy or something. And I've been sitting here thinking, if you took a poll of men and women and young men and young women, maybe today it might be different, but a poll on, do you aspire to greatness? That you'd have a lot more hands raised on the male side than on the female side. And that's why I'm glad that you took us quite quickly to things like humility as a characteristic of greatness, because those dictionary definitions certainly didn't even hint at anything like humility. And that there's greatness in your own eyes if you're a guy like Trump who thinks he's great. And there's greatness that's bestowed by the people. And that's why it's the bestowal by the people is why we call Martin Luther King and Gandhi and Mandela, these people great, because of the service that they provided, because of pretty much in all of the cases of the people that other than sports heroes, that have that absolute dedication to service to others, service to the community of life, of humans and of all nature. And so I'm glad we came down on that, but I wonder if maybe the word great itself isn't the word we want anymore. The best thing to me that came out of the COVID years was elevating caregivers to heroic status. So the caregivers were now our heroes and sheroes. And that was a shift from the kind of greatness in the dictionary definition to the kind that you're talking about, Roger, right? Where we see that those in greatest service to the people are the ones that I would say the most inspirational toward good. Those who inspire us through their words and their actions toward the good, the well-being of all people and all nature. That's what I think probably the new definition should be. And I'm not sure the word should be greatness. So we might talk about that a little bit. Can we have a new way of expressing our gratitude to those who inspire us that way?
Nice. Thank you, Elizabeth. I would also just add the freeing up of women since the 60s, after 5,000 years of male domination, should be a big part of what you're just talking about, how to change greatness into something that's not patriarchal, something that's not, I grew up in DC, and a lot of streets lead to circles, and every circle there's a guy on a horse with a sword in his hand, and that's greatness. And that's what we put on our statues. That's what we admire. So hopefully with women being able to free themselves up, we're going to get more balance of yin and yang. And we should move to, that's the point, moving to a new definition of greatness, or changing the words. I think that's right. Absolutely right.
Yeah, and as far as women are concerned, of course, we just got a huge new slap in the face, didn't we, from our Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So it's not so easy, is it? But we do need, I think, to talk about new ways of honoring those who are our true heroes and sheroes, or whatever we want to, those we most admire, who most inspire.
Yeah. And how do we do that?
By elevating those in service to heroism, like as I said, and that we've started to do that. And I think as people wake up more and more to our oneness, to the fact that we are matter energy spirits, that we are larger beings than we thought we were, not just physical bags of skin in a 3D world, but that we're getting it more and more, that we're more than that, and that we want everyone to recognize the wholeness of who we are in order to see our oneness. It's a big shift, and it's happening in the world now. And we want to support that side of things, right? Rather than the old obsolete forms that are imploding on their own. So I think our energy really should go to building the positive and to talking about not only how will we want to govern ourselves in the future, who is it that will be the arbiter of what is real information and disinformation. These are very important questions for us to discuss now, and to figure out. Yeah, I'm thinking the Haudenosaunee culture that we call the Iroquois, who had the only democracy I've ever known. And the closest thing they had to someone elevated above others, of course, was they had chiefs. But the chiefs were monitored by the grandmothers. And if the chiefs weren't serving the society, they could be taken out of power by the grandmothers. So it's a very different concept of I like the idea of high up sometimes. I tell people, raise your consciousness up high until you can see the human condition as a kind of stage play, so that you're not caught up in the scary parts, in the discouraging part, in the frightening part, but can breathe again and look and see where are things moving and where can I come down and add my energy to these currents that are moving in the healthy directions. So I don't want to get rid of the concepts of high and low, but we should use them where it's appropriate and not in terms of one human being being better than the other human beings, right?
Thanks,
Sorry.
Elizabeth. Elizabeth is a evolutionary biologist, and so nice to have her brilliance with us today.
I really appreciated what everyone has talked about. And at the same time, greatness is not a word that I feel comfortable with, but I think it's a perfectly good word as long as we don't apply it to ourselves. And talking about who is my greatest heroes, well, that's easy to do as long as I'm not one of those myself. But I wanted to share what Roger was talking about, a perspective that I think is really helpful. It's been helpful for me, and I think what Johnny was talking about of focusing always on the self. How do you do that? The tradition in Greek philosophy called Stoicism has always been very interesting to me. And if you ask who are the two greatest Stoics, one was a slave and one was an emperor. Marcus Aurelius was an emperor, didn't particularly want to be emperor, but knew that he was politically going to have to do that. As soon as he could retire, he did. The other was a slave who, again, didn't want to be a slave, but that's where he found himself. And it's interesting when you say, well, what can I do? They both said the same thing: stay within yourself. And if you're a slave, your options are somewhat limited. If you're in an abusive relationship, your options, they're there, but they're limited compared to someone who has more power. And Marcus Aurelius said, well, power is not all that great either, because I'd rather be just sitting home reading, but I can't. I have to be emperor. And it's kind of interesting to play with that sense of what do you have control over and what do you not have control over? And that's where they came down to their term ataraxia, peace of mind, is controlling what you can control and letting the other go. Like death, I'm going to die. I can't control that. Now, being sick, I can control how I respond to being sick. I can respond to a lot of elements of that. So that sense of staying within yourself and letting that be a kind of guide. And I was looking up Campbell's archetypes, and I like that one of them was the hero, but another was the mentor. That, we have a chance to help. And sometimes our chances are greater and sometimes less. I mean, sometimes we're the executive director or the emperor. Sometimes being the executive director doesn't mean anything. And, we work within that framework of where we are. As a nurse, you have power to be great in certain contexts, and people will appreciate that. But you're also limited. There are people above you who will cut you off from doing certain things. And so, the Stoic response of just peace of mind, controlling what you can control, and then, sort of letting the other go for the moment. You keep working and things may change. You may be freed from slavery. You may get out of the abusive relationship. You may finally get to retire from being whatever it is you were doing. So I've always appreciated that part. I think that's kind of what you were talking about too, Roger.
I think that's a great idea of we can all be great. How do we make ourselves great? Whatever position we're in, the slave or the master, the emperor, and peace of mind certainly is a great thing to shoot for. And many traditions say that, of course. No, I think that's really true, Bob. I like the idea that we can all be great. I think like I started out saying, the concept of greatness, we could take it anywhere, So that's really a focus on individual greatness.
Yeah, we can't all be powerful, but that's okay too. Within our own situation, we can respond well.
Who was it? There was a famous, I'm trying to think who it was. And he said, I don't want to be the greatest, whatever he was. I just want to be the greatest me.
Okay. No cameras. I'm outside. But I really resonated with what Roger said about the cycles. And I'm thinking about, I've been watching my my niece who just had twins, and how important it is that she cycle between taking care of herself and taking care of her family, because you can't take care of her family if she's overextended. And so it's this natural cycle of taking care of oneself and then taking care of the greater whole. And it seems like, yeah, it seems like a cycle that fulfills the wholeness, if you will. It's like, I'm seeing that yin yang symbol of Tai Chi, that it's this continual circle. But there is this other thing in nature that seems to appear, we call 2 steps forward and 1 step backward. And maybe that's what's happening with the Supreme Court. And I got to thinking, maybe it's that 1 step backward that wakes up all the people who didn't get on board to jump on board and take that leap forward into what is being birthed. Because I think this will be a huge wake up call. And those who slept through it and didn't sign up and take care of their part, this may be what wakes them up and brings them on board. Those are my thoughts.
Mahalo, David.
That's really consistent, David, with Campbell's idea that, in your darkest cave lies your greatest treasure. And I like the way you articulated it in a very clear example of, hey, you didn't get the message, just kick you in the head. Now you're ready to join.
I know Renee is going to be so happy when she gets a chance to view this recording, because it really has been a wonderful sharing, and I thank you, Roger, for what just a wonderful, wonderful presentation. It certainly has opened my eyes to certain things. And, I'm grateful for this traveling and learning through life. And I was reading through the almanac, and I came across this one reading, which is for Tuesday, and it resonated with me. And if you don't mind, I'm going to share it. I don't know which side is anybody on anymore. I don't really care. There is a moment when we have to transcend the side we're on and understand that we are creatures of a higher order. Leonard Cohen. And I thought that is just really, really wonderful, because, we're really here for a short time. And thinking about greatness, we're not going to be in any history books. We're not going to be remembered except by our families and those that we have had contact with. When we die, they're going to say, oh yeah, I remember her, or I remember him. And they're not going to necessarily remember what we did, but they're certainly going to remember how we treated each other. And I just am so, so thankful for this opportunity to spend this time with all of you. And I know we're almost, we're right on time. And so I'm wondering if anybody would like to give a vote of thanks to Roger for being our inspirational speaker today. I'm going to open it up to somebody to give him thanks.
Thank you, Roger. I'm going to Google you a bit more. Awesome. Thank you for
Thanks,
sharing.
Johnny. I appreciate it.
Service, brother.
Thank you,
for
Roger,
coming.
for introducing me to this new group. Very
Yeah,
interesting.
you're welcome, Parani. I'm glad you could come. I see Jeannie's here too. And
Is it
Lonnie.
Jeannie from the
Jeannie Lum.
Foundation?
Yes,
Jeannie
hi,
Lum.
Barney.
Hi, Jeannie.
Hi,
Mhm.
haven't seen you for a while either.
Hello.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you, Roger, for inviting me. It's a very interesting discussion. I think where it led to in the end was sort of where I was also thinking about that, every person individually has their greatness or ways of being great, and on the daily level, or not so much on a daily level, but when we ask ourselves or do something that we think is great, we don't do that all the time or often necessarily, but if you look at the characteristics of what that particular situation is, I think it's often somehow alleviating some form perhaps of suffering or need, but also certainly elevating the situation for whatever we're doing that we classify as great. You know, if we say, oh, that's a great thing, that'd be a great thing to do. You know, kind of.
Being great
Just
would be
to-
a great thing to do.
Yeah. Roger, just to add to that, for me, I think the greatness would be each individual would try to work up to their highest moral values to do what is right for the community. For example, you mentioned Mike Pence. I think I respect him more on that, his decision on January 6th to decide without giving in to the pressure. So I think that that's a good example. Even you're under the pressure and you have to make decision based on what is the best for the greater society.
Hi, Lonnie.
I just wanted to mahalo. Thank you, Roger. And I just posted something. I just wanted to share as a mentor for millennials. My mantra to inspire and empower is to shine unapologetically and know the template is within. Because you spoke about that each one of us has a responsibility and the solutions lie in that template. And these millennials, these young ones, came in knowing that they have something to do. They all have really, really strong soul purposes. And so I think for us to support these beautiful light bringers and builders is to let them shine unapologetically. I just spoke to someone at my acupuncturist office, and she said her little kindergarten boy already came in and said, I'm going to build robots to change the world and to make the world a better place. He's in a kindergarten. And so he went to the teacher at third grade, because they're only allowing third graders to do it, and said, I want to do this. I know what I want to do. And so it may change that school system to allow the kindergartners that already have a clear vision of what they want to do. So I really feel that it's our place to shine, let them shine unapologetically, and to let them know that the template is within and encourage them. And we will see solutions. I'm very, very sure about that.
Yeah, nice. That's a nice phrase. A nice, really nice phrase, Lonnie. Thank you. I was just thinking as Lonnie was talking about the need to change our educational system, because there's so much memorizing and what's the point of it when you can Google anything in the world in 13 seconds, you know? I mean, it's good to have some knowledge at your fingertips, but maybe the focus should be on allowing the creativity of a first grader who wants to make a robot to, you know, figure out how to do it, even if it's just very preliminary. So another thing I think that's encouraging about, you might say, in some ways it's dumbed our society down, but in other ways it you know, the other side of it is, the bright side is, maybe it'll cause us to be more creative in how we educate people.
Well, thank you all. But before we leave, I would like to remind everybody that next week we are going to be on the topic of realizing we are one. And Carolyn is going to be our speaker on that topic next week. Thank you, Carolyn. Just thank you all for being here today. This was very inspiring. Thank
Mahalo nui
you.
loa.
Thank you, Mary.